So, you've leveled up your character, fought your way through dungeons, events, and bosses, and now you are ready to settle into your class and play the role you wish to fulfill. The game has roles that MMO players will find very familiar, but does change the way you may approach your role given the combat system. The three roles players can fulfill would be damage, support/healing, and control. People interested in being the classic DPS will find great comfort in the game, with many tools to use to slay your foes. Damage characters can focus on strike damage or condition damage. Strike damage being more physical strikes that deliver a packet of damage, with condition damage being the more classic idea of damage over time, or dots. Some DPS players will also be interested in providing offensive group buffs in the form of offensive boons. These are Might, Fury, and Quickness. Those interested in aiding your allies through healing, shielding, and magical enhancements will also find comfort in knowing that this is a valid role with content requiring your specialized skill set. Everyone has a heal skill, but bosses aren't always that forgiving. So building a class into more of a support role will allow you to keep your friends alive and in the fight. You can do so through direct means of healing or by taking preventative measures by applying barriers to allies to shield them from damage. Different classes gain access to different methods. Healers also want to focus on providing group buffs through the boons regeneration, vigor, swiftness, and oftentimes alacrity. Control/tanks. For those of you looking to play a tank in-game, your methods of going about it might look just a little bit different. Building more toughness onto your character may increase your chances of gaining aggro, but it's not guaranteed. Taunt is a condition in the game, but it's not integrated throughout all classes. The main focus of control/tank players would be to physically control the battlefield. You can do so through direct crowd control effects such as stuns, dazes, launches, knockbacks, floats, and more. These effects are very useful when used wisely, and are also great to help break defiance bars on bigger bosses. Certain classes can also create physical walls that enemies cannot pass through and/or create areas where projectiles and spells will be destroyed or reflected back to the caster. Control and tank players will have to have great timing and understanding with certain skills, while also upkeeping damage throughout the fight. Boons that tank players might want to focus on would be protection, resolution, stability, and resistance to make sure their group can take hits and keep moving. With that little summary of roles covered, one might ask themselves, then what class can play what roles? A beautiful aspect of the game is that all professions can play all roles, but with various potencies and reliability as the game continues to receive balance updates. When building for a role, you want to look at a few sections: gear stats, weapon and utility skills, and specializations. For gear stats, it is the player's responsibility to go after the stats that will allow them to complete their role. You can attain gear through drops, purchasing gear, or crafting it. As there are currently many stat types in the game, I've highlighted certain stats that are associated with roles. For DPS characters, strike damage builds would require berserkers, assassins, dragon, and diviners with some concentration. And for those interested in condition damage builds, carrion, viper, sinisters, and ritualist gear. Ritualist with some more concentration on it as well. For healers, I'd say this would be boiled down to magi, harrier, and plague doctors. I personally would love to see certain stat types updated to make better use of concentration and not just put a bunch of defensive attributes. And for tanks, I'd probably recommend knights, minstrels, givers, and the vigilant stat. Now, not all of these stats might work for your profession, and other stats might be more valuable than others. Given that this is a general guide, feel free to continue to do research about your specific profession, and don't be afraid to play around. For weapons and utility skills, much to my last point, weapons are totally unique by profession, and so are utility skills. However, I shall use the Guardian as an example of choices you can make to fill a role. So for weapons, if I'm looking to build my Guardian as a DPS, I would probably use the Greatsword or Scepter, as I see these weapons concentrating on damage and attacking as quickly and fiercely as possible. Now if I'm looking to build a healer, I'd probably gravitate towards Staff or Mace, as these weapons give out healing and supportive boons to allies. Finally, if I'm looking to build a tank, I would probably pick up the Hammer and use the offhand shield to further give my character defensive effects and control skills to either manipulate the battle or deal Defiance bar damage. Using this example from my thought process on the Guardian, you can use this mindset for your own character. Take your time looking at the weapons and utilities available and look for those key identifiers for the role. DPS being big strike damage or many damaging conditions, as well as offensive boons. Healers, look out for healing, barriers, and other supportive boons. And with tank or more control-oriented characters, you can look for things like self-barriers, even group barriers, blocks, stability, defiance damage, and stun breaks. Now getting into specializations. The specializations you choose are essentially traits, which increase your expertise and experience in your role. When in the Training tab, the specializations are formatted in a general way that is shared between all professions. The first is usually damage. Your second spec is usually condition and critical strikes. Your third, tank tactics and self-sustain. The fourth being more healing and group support. And the fifth, playing to your class's mechanics and general traits that are more flexible for your role. There is some variation with this format, and certain profession specs bleed those roles between the specializations themselves. And as for the Revenant, your first specialization in your training wheel is actually your condition one, and your last spec is more focused on strike damage, which is a bit of an aberration with this format. Put all these elements together and start your training. DPS want to be focusing on those big hits and providing those offensive boons. Healers, you want to focus on keeping allies alive, rezzing them, and providing supportive boons. And where tanks are needed, they focus on positioning, dealing damage of course, and providing defensive tools. Thank you all so very much for coming, and thank you ArenaNet to your continued partnership. If you perhaps want a refresher on the basics of Guild Wars 2 combat and skill acquisition, head over to my video on Guild Wars 2 combat and skills. And if you want to find more out about healing in particular, go check out my video on how to heal in Guild Wars 2. If you'd like to support the channel and get early access to videos, head on over to the Patreon. Purchase the expansions and try the Guild Wars 2 game for free using my links down below, and catch me on Twitch every day of the week. Thank you all for coming on by, and I'll see you all later. Bye everyone!